Excel accounting practice problem. Balance sheet condensed format. Get ready because we're about to excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we put together the worksheet from a blank sheet, now continuing to enter transactions into it if you have access to it. There's two tabs on down below, an example tab and a practice tab. The practice tab starting out where we left off last time, the example tab in essence being an answer key. We're going to be staying over here on the practice tab side of things. In a prior presentation, we took our adjusted trial balance. We created our financial statements from it. As we did so, we constructed something that can basically be transparent as being something that has been created from the data input by adding every account in the financial statements that are included in the trial balance. We also included zero balances so that it can then also be changed quite easily as we make changes to, say, the financial data. Now we want to consider a more condensed type of financial statement, starting with the balance sheet, where we might make some alterations that would combine some accounts possibly. And in some of these combinations or some of these changes that we make, we want to point out that they could be done for accounting software as well, meaning software could accommodate some of these changes just within the formatting and structure of entering the data in the system, for example, with the use of sub-accounts. And some of them, the accounting software will not exactly be able to pick up oftentimes, accounting software like QuickBooks, and you would still possibly need to take your financial statements and you could still clean them up a bit for external purposes if you so choose. So to do this, let's go ahead and hide some cells. I'm going to be hiding from HO, and I'm going to go all the way to the right past our financial statements, and we're going to build new financial statements. I'm going to go all the way out here to KW. I'm going to right click and hide that stuff. I'm going to make another skinny column over here so I can try to unhide this stuff without basically unhiding everything. So I'm going to make another skinny. And so the first thing, of course, I'm not going to get detailed on the header of it. I'm just going to call it a balance sheet. So balance sheet, you might call it, a condensed balance sheet or something like that versus the longer balance sheet, the standard balance sheet versus a condensed balance sheet or something like that. I'm just going to call it a balance sheet. I'm going to make that and format it up top with the black and white formatting as we've been using for our header. So I'm going to go up top and say, let's make this black and white. So black and white, I'm going to make then the assets, and I'm going to format that with our colors still, which again, you might not want to use the colors for external reporting purposes, but I still want to tie it in so we could group it in a color coding way to our financials over here. So I'm going to select these two up top and say, let's make this the color of a dark green. And then the text are going to be the light green, the dark and the light green. That looks so nice. Look at that. That's amazing. And then we're going to say current assets, colon for the subcategory. Let's add a little bit more space here, adding a bit more space. And then I'm going to pull in my accounts. Now, this is where we're going to start to group things together because these first two accounts are the checking account and undeposited funds. And note that oftentimes in accounting software, the undeposited funds might be located in some other area as like an other current asset as opposed to a checking account. In a QuickBooks type of software, this checking account will be labeled under a checking account type. So they're going to have a checking account, category of types of accounts. And that's not normal financial accounting categories. So oftentimes for financial accounting, we would call it something like cash and cash equivalents. Cash equivalents or something like that. It should be called cash, not checking account. So that's what we will first. I'll combine that, and I'm going to sum up these two columns, or these two items. Now note there's a zero here, so not a big deal, but you can see how when we start to sum things up over here, it can cause confusion a bit. Also note that you might say, well, I can fix that in accounting software, not the name of the checking account, but possibly having these two accounts combined together with a sub-account. But this is one area where you can't do that because in like accounting software, this one would be a different account type. It would be a checking account. This would be an other current asset, so you can't really do a sub-account. So again, the software, this is an area where you might have some more cleaning up to do, and you might say, I'm going to sum this up and call this cash and cash equivalents or something like that if you wanted to be more formal in your presentation. And I'm not going to get, we're just going to go over some general kind of ideas that you might do to get to clean things up and possibly be a little bit more formal if you wanted to from like accounting software. So then we got the accounts receivable. In software like QuickBooks, they often have a separate category for the account type of accounts receivable, which results in a subcategory up top, which is something that could be a little bit messy, that you can remove the subcategory. You could possibly do that by doing a different type of financial statement in like accounting software. We're going to bring that down. If you had something else that was involved here, like allowances, then you'd have to deal for the allowances too, but we won't get into that. Then we'll pick up the inventory. Inventory, fairly straightforward. We'll pick that up. We've got the prepaid insurance. Notice if you had multiple prepaid insurance or other prepaid accounts and other kind of other current assets, you might group them together as simply other current assets. So for example, these two, you might say, well, the short-term investments are a small amount, and if possibly in the prepaid insurance, if that's going to be a small amount, we might group those together and call these other current assets, and then group them together equals the sum, so that we can condense our financials, given the fact that obviously the short-term investments in this case are not relevant in terms of dollar amount, and that can clean things up and shorten things up. Let's do an indentation here, selecting these, assignment and indent. So there we have that. Let's put an underline there, font group and underline. Let's call this the total current assets. This is the total current assets. That's what I called it. I just called it the total current. Let's indent this 2 times. Indent, indent. Sum it up in the outer column equals the sum. And there we have it. So there's summing that up. So that's the 133,756 on that. And then let's call this, now this one we could be calling it in accounting software. These items might be called fixed assets. I think oftentimes for financial reporting, it might more often be called property, plant, and equipment or something like that. PP&E, property, plant. So let's call it that. Let's call it that. Let's call it property, plant, and equipment. Your property, plant, and equipment. There, I called it property, plant, and equipment. So then we're going to say we got the furniture and the fixtures. This is the area where we got to say, how do we want to break out the book value and the cost? Do we want to be combining together the accumulated depreciation in one account or breaking them out? I'm going to do it in a similar fashion we did before. I'm going to have the costs up top, up here, and then we'll put the accumulated depreciation under it. Now, oftentimes I used to kind of, I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Now, notice this is a Contra Asset account. So now your question is, do I want to represent the Contra Asset account as a negative on my financial statements or as a positive? Because I might actually say less accumulated depreciation. So for example, I might say, let's copy this and paste this 1, 2, 3, just the values. And I might say less ACC depre. We also might have an issue with this abbreviation right here. I might say, maybe I should not even have this ACC depre and just call it let's say less accumulated depreciation. So I'll change the name, and then we will pick that up, and I'm going to flip the sign here to make it now a positive number, because I put less here to indicate it's a subtraction. And then the question is, do I want another account down here, another item to have the book value, or do I want to just put it on the right-hand side? I'm going to put it on the right-hand side. This time I have to subtract them, 98,000 minus the accumulated depreciation to get the 88,166. I'll do the same for the machinery and equipment. I'll say machinery and equipment, and then equals this, less accumulated depreciation. So we'll do the same thing here. This is going to be the 5,000. I want to show this as a positive number that we will then subtract out by saying negative of that 139, and then we'll take the equals to 5,000 minus the 139. So now we're showing the machinery and equipment and less, giving the word telling you want to subtract those to get you the book value, which we didn't put in another subcategory, but rather put right to the right here so that we could see it, which is a little bit more condensed way of displaying it. I'm going to then indent these, selecting these items, go to the alignment and indent. We're going to call this total property, plant, and equipment. And then we'll sum up those two equals the sum of those two. Let's put another underline here, underline, put an underline there. Let's put an underline here, a lot of lines going under. And then let's indent this to double indent, alignment double indent. And that's going to be total assets then. So total assets are going to be equal to the current assets plus the property, plant, and equipment total assets. Now we can check all these numbers by simply selecting these. These are our current assets. 133756 ties out here. It's a little bit more difficult to see due to the fact that I made some combinations here, but we still got that double checking factor pretty easily in the trial balance. If I select these, that's going to give us the 9327. There it is right there, even though we formatted it a little bit differently with the Contra Assets and whatnot. And if I select the whole green thing, all the assets, 226226,783, which matches here, everything looks like it should. So let's go ahead, let's put an underline here. Let's put a double underline there and move on to the liabilities. The liabilities side of things. Let's make a skinny. I'm going to make it skinny in the LB. The LB needs a skinny. And then we're going to call this liabilities. Liabilities. Your liabilities. There, I called it liabilities. That's what you are. Liabilities. And then we're going to go to the font group and we're going to hit the drop down and let's make this that dark orange with the light colors mirroring what we did over here in the trusty TB. Then we got the current liabilities. Current liabilities, colon. So then we got our accounts payable, the Visa, the interest. Now the accounts payable, we'll pull that in like we normally would. In accounting software like QuickBooks, they often have a subcategory for accounts payable because it's an account type. So we can kind of clean that out. We don't really need the subcategory there typically. I need to flip the sign. So every time I put an amount in, I'm going to say negative, for example, in LD for negative of that 4008. So then the Visa here is a fairly, usually, it's a fairly small amount. So I might put that in some, maybe like other liabilities, maybe. I've got the two loan payables down here, which might be more significant than the Visa and the interest. So maybe I want to move that up top. And the payroll liability, maybe I move that up top. Sales tax payable, possibly I group that into other. So let's try to do some grouping here. And I'm going to say, maybe these two loan payables should be up top. I'm not going to put two separate loan accounts with two separate loan numbers in the presentation to external users. I'm just going to call it loans payable, and we might then say like current portion. We don't really need to say current portion there. It's a little bit redundant because it's under the current liabilities, but I'll do it anyways. Equals the sum. And then we'll pick up this stuff just in case anyone's kind of dense. This is the current portion because the long-term portion is going to be down below in the long-term area. We're going to add those two together. I got to flip the sign, make it a positive. So I'm going to put a negative before the sum, and we pick both of those items up in one line item. Now the next one I want to pick up here, the next most important one, looks like it's going to be the payroll liability. That's significant. So I want to break it out on its own. It needs to be broken out on its own possibly. So payroll liabilities, I'm going to say, okay, negative of the payroll liabilities. Like so what? And then here, like this one, this, and the sales tax and the unearned revenue, possibly those are not the most significant dollar amounts. So we might say, I'd like to just put them all into like other current liabilities instead of breaking them out. That again, that we might break them out. It depends how much detail you want. But like the $73, probably not worth putting into its own category. So maybe I'll just put all the rest of them into other current liabilities. And this is a aesthetical choice. I got to put negatives to pick up these multiple items here. So I'm going to say negative of the Visa minus the interest minus the sales tax minus the unearned revenue, and enter. So we've got all those added together here at the 2102, which makes it a little bit more difficult to tie out to the trial balance, but we're cleaning this thing up, hopefully to make the presentational purposes easier. So alignment indent, or let's indent this stuff, alignment indent, and then let's call this total current liabilities. Your total current liabilities. That's what I called it. And then we'll put this on the outside. We're going to say this is the equals the sum of these four. And we will indent font group and let's underline. And then we can double check that number by just selecting all the current liabilities, not including this last one. And does that work? Because there's way more accounts over here. 26, 220, 294, 26. It does. It's right. I know what I'm talking about, I think, most of the time. And then we'll say this is going to be long-term liabilities, colon. And then we only have that one account. I'm not going to call it like the name over here that would be tied out to a specific account and account, number. I'm just going to call it loan payable or something like that. Loan payable, long-term portion. The long-term portion thing being redundant once again. But you'll often see it, so we'll be redundant. I'm going to put this directly into the outer column because, well, let's make a subtotal. Sometimes you wouldn't want to make another subtotal of it. Well, actually, I'll put this in the outer column. This is really how you normally see it most of the time because there's only one thing in it. And so to have another subtotal would be super redundant. So I'm just going to say there's our long-term liabilities and indent and have that there. And then this is going to be the total liabilities. And we'll just sum up the outer column equals the SUM of these two. That comes out to the 8364. We could say, does that tie out if I was to add up all my liabilities by just selecting them? 8364. Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Let's put an underline here, font group underline. And then now we just need the equity side of things. Equity. Let's put that, let's skip a line. Equity. And I'm going to make this blue to match the blue stuff down here. So we'll make it blue. Font, and let's make it, I think it was like this one that we used, dark blue, and then the lighter blue. Wonderfully contrasting with the double blue. And this is just going to be the equity over here. Now note, a lot of people will tell you you can't make the balance sheet until you make the income statement first, but if you've got a well-designed trial balance, that's not true. That's not true. You could just take the negative sum of everything in the equity area, and that way you can construct your financial statements from top to bottom, assets, liabilities, equity, income, and then expenses, the way most people would probably do it if they weren't told otherwise. And so there we have the 143,719. Now, if you have an ugly, unformatted trial balance that isn't wonderfully designed, then it might be a little, then you could see the argument that you might do it with the income statement first, but I like to do the balance sheet first. Don't answer that on a test question. If someone's asking you on a CPA question, which statement do you need to make first? But in practice, do what you think is right? That's equity. So here we go. Total liabilities and equity. We'll sum this up, equal the sum. Summing these two up. We'll put the underline here. Font group and underline, put the double underline there, and you can see that we are in balance, and we could check that equity number a couple different ways. Now note, we could say, well, it's going to be the total liabilities, debits minus the credits, 143,719, or it's going to be the assets minus the liabilities, debits minus the credits. Well, that's way too hard to calculate. I got to pull out my 10 key to get that out. No, you don't, because we formatted the trial balance in a way that it's really easy to do. 143,719, 143,719. So now let's just clean this thing up a bit because we're in balance. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. It's a little bit more condensed of a format. Let's do our blue and borders. Let's pull this green thing out. Let's pull these two out. One more by get it in our paintbrush, put in our paintbrush and just paintbrush in that right there. And then let's actually pull this black part all the way over to the end, like there. And then I want to put this balance sheet in the middle. So I'm going to select these. And one way you could do that is you could go to the Home tab and the alignment, and you can like do that. But then you got this one fat cell, this really wide cell, and I don't want to, you know, insult the cell, but I don't like it doing. I'd rather do it this way. Select that area and right click, and then go to the format the cells and go to the alignment, horizontal alignment, and we want to center across the selection. And so then you get the same thing, but you don't kind of, you know, that causes its own kind of problems, but I like to not have that one cell, which kind of causes problems when you try to hide things and do stuff like that. So then we're going to take this one, let's paintbrush that orange with our paintbrush. Just put that on our paintbrush here in the clipboard and paint that cell with it. And then I'll make this whole thing blue and bordered. Let's take this whole thing, going up to the font group. I like to put it on that nice, light blue and the more colors. Standard, the light blue. Excel is Fun Guide channel blue. Okay. And then font group drop down. We're going to go to the borders. So there we have that. Then let's put that same border blue right here. Let's do it down to here maybe. And then go to the blue and bordered. And then finally down here, border blue, border blue. Let's do a spell check just on these cells. Let's see if I blatantly made a blatant error. There's one. Liabilities. It's not even in the spell check. That's bad. Liabilities. Fixed it. Okay. So there's where we have it. So we'll do this. We'll do a similar process then next time to the income statement.